another episode of Green and Shy with Dan Garms, with Alton Erdemir, and with our guest tonight, Dean Matt, the author of Gone to Pot. And looking forward to having a fun, spirited conversation with Dean tonight. And we're actually really having a fireside chat here. Dean's probably sweating his ass off, but it's great. And you got the pizza oven back there by the fireplace, Dean. It's looking good.
I guess, I didn't know it was bring your own fireplace.
Yeah,
What kind of operation are you running here?
Well, it all depends if you give us a slice of pizza later.
We'll give it a shot.
Good.
And thanks for the introduction, Dan. And if this is the first time you're joining us at Green and Shy, just to follow up with us, Green and Shy is really a platform for opportunity. Before this whole pandemic and right around the corner, we'll be having them again. The goal was to have events to really support the community, provide opportunity for people that want to learn about CBD cannabis, learn about how to get a job, learn about training, starting a business, getting the support that you need when you have a business, whether it's banking, processing, sales, marketing, recruitment, or construction, literally any opportunity. The goal is to have a platform so you can have those resources and really connect with each other. It's all about connection. So we need people like Dan, or Dean and Dan, that are on the show because they have that expertise and they share that great knowledge. And every week, that's what we're here to do, is really spread that love for this industry and that passion. And, I'll let Dan take it away with that because we have a great panelist today with us. Dean has a great experience, and I'm excited to hear the stories we're going to hear tonight.
Well, Dean's got a really interesting background. He came as a chief financial officer and chief operating officer, has a strong degree in finance, working with large corporations. And just when he was ready to reach for the beach and start flying around and playing golf, he actually has a love for aviation. He's been flying since he was 16. He and his wife fly all over, play golf. I've seen him interview people on his sojourns across the country. And he worked for a very large cannabis company and decided to write a book on Gone to Pot. And I have many, many agreements with Dean on what he's written in the book because from everything I see and being a long-term recruiter and having a lot of experience in this industry before even recruiting in it, I think you've touched on some points, Dean, that are very accurate and just becoming apparent to the industry right now. So why don't you tell us how, it's an interesting story and I know it, but I'd love it if you'd share it with our guest on how you got started and lured into this little beginning of a new industry.
Yeah, I don't know how much I was lured. I mean, I was retired. I was quote unquote on the beach a little bit for a while. I had some job robots still, pinging me here and open up an email here and there, and came across one for a CFO cannabis company. Got a phone call to interview for that company. And I told my wife, been there, done that, but I was intrigued. Cannabis, you got to remember, this was 2018. The go-go days. It was like the summer of 18, Green Thumb just went public and a lot of buzz out of MedMen and stuff like that. This company wanted to go public, Chicago-based company. You would know it if I told you. And wanted to go public, needed a CFO, and I jumped in, right away. And with I've been in a lot of startups, not just corporate environments. In fact, I kind of like the startups most. So I've kind of been around the block a little bit with respect to that. And with most startups, it's a fixer-upper. If you want to go public, as this one did, because they wanted to hit that Canadian Stock Exchange wave, hell of a lot of work to do. I think the goals of them and the timing for them wanting to go public and what was real were, night and day. A lot of these companies have people that are very hard-working founders and successful in privately held businesses, but somewhat naive when it comes to working in a multi-state operation, although they built a multi-state operation, but to get to that next level. And they kind of got, in my mind, kind of bumped up against how much further they could take it. Some of their expectations were unrealistic. And long story short, we shifted gears. Instead of going public, there was all sorts of companies that wanted to buy us. And we ended up structuring a transaction for the largest U.S. cannabis transaction in history at the time. We ended up selling.
That's interesting. What I'd really like to touch on, Dean, and this is something as a recruiter and working, in the Silicon Valley with tech most of my life, I'm seeing the cannabis industry coming in with a lot of people that have, grower experience, a lot of it illegal before we came along. And now it's starting to percolate up where they realize the margins are shrinking, the The glory days are not here as they were at the beginning. And talk about the quality of people hired before you came along, and before they get adult supervision and really start to move forward. I'd love to hear about that, because I see that being a problem in a lot of cannabis companies, especially the big MSOs.
Yeah, I do write a little bit about it. Basically, it could be from anyone that fogs a mirror, anyone with a heartbeat. I mean, people were hiring quickly. And it kind of reminds me of my days when I was with Waste Management. Waste Management in the 80s was a go-go company. It was highly acquisitive. It was consolidating, the garbage industry. Waste Management was run by Wayne Huizinga. Now, Wayne is a truly world-class entrepreneur. Not only did he start Waste Management, but he started Blockbuster Video, AutoNation USA, Extended Stay America, a lot of big brand names. He's owned all the sports teams in South Florida at one time or another. Passed away a couple of years ago. But at Waste Management, they were hiring college degree accountants, and I got in there and I loved the environment. It was think on your feet, it was 5% accounting and 95% dealing with people and figuring it out, and to a large extent, a lot of these entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry figure it out as they go along. That's still going on, so on one hand, kudos to them for putting this industry on the map and for moving it along. The talent level, is I inherited not a lot of talent, quite honestly. If we're going to really be, think about it, if we're going to be a Canadian Stock Exchange company, I need more than three accountants that don't know the difference between cash-based accounting and GAAP accounting. So let's start there. And not only did that's what I inherited, but the owners didn't know any better either. They just thought, hey, we'll just get some auditors in here. How hard could that be? You shuffle some paperwork. Next month we'll have our audit done, and then we'll go public. And by and large, it was a big learning experience.
Well, I'm sure that was. So, as an MSO, were you involved in the expansion when you came on, as far as looking at all the numbers and the expansion cost of building the company out?
As CFO, I should have been, but I wasn't, and that's another fault of the company. And a lot of companies have the same fault. In all fast-growing companies, it's not going to be perfect. But it's got to be decent. And I would say we weren't decent, and a lot of companies aren't decent. Cash flow. Why are companies running out of cash? Because they haven't figured out the math. If you're going to run a expansion strategy and a land grab strategy, you better know what you're doing. You better know that how to expend scarce resources. The money. The worst thing that happened to the industry is that the money was flowing too easily. $100 million here and $50 million there. After a while, it's all big money, and investors are pushing these companies to go cast your net and put as many companies up under letter of intent that you can, and to acquire. And the guys running these companies had no acquisitions experience before, and the industry as it is today is by and large the result.
In your book, you characterized a lot of this to be like the .com era and the mortgage collapse, and I see a lot of the same parallels. But you've lived it. I mean, I've been on the outside realm of it, but being inside with a multi-state operator, talk about possibly, if you can, what it costs to just do one 40,000 foot indoor grow operation. And I don't believe people realize how much it really costs to build this out.
Well, rules of thumb. I mean, a grow operation, I always pencil in $10 to $15 million, for maybe that size facility. Let's start there. For a dispensary, anywhere from a $250,000 to $1 million on the high end, but then you probably need some working capital on top of that. For license applications, you could do it on a shoestring, or you could, as a lot of companies have done, and I see a lot of social equity companies I'm working with, they've continued to do that. Some haven't hired lawyers, to keep their cost and risk down. But that's $250,000 if you want to do it upright for, give you a good chance at winning an application.
You touched base on something, and you mentioned the social equity, and a lot of our previous guests have, had that angle. That's kind of one angle that we try to help out as well. If some of our previous sponsors and people we've highlighted at our events, and different opportunities like the training with High Haven and other things that you can do. What is it that you're advising some of these social equity people that are applying but really have a trouble finding that funding option? It's something that everyone has a different answer for it, and someone with yourself, I'm sure you might have something interesting as well, because it sounds like you're working directly with them.
Well, in Illinois, the die is cast, the applications are in, right?
Yep.
And I write in my book, I think the deck is stacked against the social equity applicants. I think the state of Illinois may be well-intentioned or naive, I don't know, but they let another round of licenses October 1st, right, of last year, and now what they're trying to do is to get, or they were due January 2nd. So those are in. I kind of think that 90-day time frame works against the social equity people, because they're bumping up against entrenched, experienced companies, that have been there, done that before. And especially if you're going in without attorneys, your chances of doing a winning application aren't that good.
Well, yeah, absolutely right. And some of these cases, it makes sense to have some kind of guideline on that, because the last thing you want is some of those same big players that you're talking about sitting on licenses and not letting anyone get them. So there has to be something, but it needs to be something that's fair on both sides, because they need the time. And I'm presuming that's one of the reasons why all the applications that have been approved are delayed, because they don't want that to hinder their 90-day period as well. So at least they're trying to do some things. But as far as funding, it makes it really difficult for some of these groups. Right.
And here in Chicago, there's a particular, additional issue. There's been a big backlash against the old white guys. There was a photo in the Tribune, and went viral when they were announcing, where people can now cite their adult use licenses that they just were gifted, basically. It was a bunch of white guys in the room, and a lot of the aldermen here in Chicago said, "Don't come. I don't care if you get a license or not. You're not coming in my ward unless you partner with a social equity person."
They did that in Westwood. The alderman there said that, and sticking to it. I don't think one's open there yet.
Yep.
That's good.
Dean, how do you think our social equity program in Illinois, do you think it sets any standard in the country compared to other states, or it's really not much different?
I don't think it's much different, and I don't think it's anything that's going to win any awards. I look at this, I look at the state, I write about this in my book. The state, I'm not a fan of the state of Illinois. Why do you live here? Believe me, I got one foot out the door. But you remember a couple of years ago, the state of Illinois' finances are so poor, they couldn't even pay the lottery winners. I mean, how bad is that? So I think the state of Illinois and city of Chicago, for that, wanted to just get as much tax revenue as possible as quickly as they could. So that's why I believe they granted everybody that had a medical license an adult use license as well. And I just don't think it was done with the right amount of forethought and structure in the deal.
Well, on another note too, we were the first state to pass it through the legislature rather than through a ballot where people voted on it, because why? Because they wanted the money. They saw the money and they wanted it.
Well, that's actually a good point too, Dan. And maybe you might know something more about this, Dean, because Toy Hutchinson spoke at our first event, and she said that other people are taking example because of that point right there. Not only do they want the money, but they were showing where the revenues were going, which is a little bit different as well. I don't know if you broke that down at all.
I don't think I got into that into the book yet. But I do believe that the medical license, come on, let's not kid ourselves. It's just an part one of a 3-act play, with the ultimate act being getting the adult use license, And I think the funny thing in Illinois is how many times have we all seen the state or the city saying, that's the magic bullet, gambling, raise the alcohol and tobacco taxes, on and on and on, the magic bullet. So I kind of laugh, for the first 3 months, everyone said, "Oh, the state did 30 million of marijuana sales this year." I'm like, does it really matter? When you got such runaway spending in a state? it's almost counterproductive that companies are, or that the state is relying on this revenue, so.
And actually, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to say, in your book, you wrote a little bit about that, and I'm in agreement with that. I thought it was right on, because in this state, you'd think they'd take this revenue and use it to maybe pay down some of their billions in debt, but no, they're going to find new avenues to spend it and continue to bankrupt the state. That's just politics in Illinois.
I think
That's why I got one foot out the door.
I think it's politics everywhere, and I also wrote in my state that the presidential candidates, I watched the Democratic debate. They don't know their numbers either. It's all funny money at some point in time. I mean, Kamala Harris, and I did a double take when I'm watching the debate. I look at my wife. I said, "Did she really say trillion?" She wants to give $2 trillion to historically black colleges and universities. 2 trillion. Now, I'm sure there's a mistake in there. I don't know if it should be billion or million, but nobody else caught this. Not the other 8 Democratic presidential candidates on the platform. I didn't see any news media cover it. So how numb are we going to be, or do we have to be, to just accept numbers? People, that's one thing about waste management, and one thing that the cannabis industry needs. They need to run these businesses by the numbers. Now that sounds sterile, right? It sounds like an accountant or a finance guy is running the company. No, you got to run a business, and the cannabis industry right now is doing a very poor job running a business.
And that goes along with that. I kind of am curious, as someone that's seen it on the inside of a big company, part of that might be some of this, everyone talks about the cash business. It has to be cash, international banking. I mean, we provide some banking solutions and some, loop arounds and stuff that work really well and are completely legal and have sources, but everyone is still using cash. And that leaves a lot of that accountability. I mean, how much of that, what you're talking about, just throwing up numbers, is because they are working on a cash system and they can put things in the gray areas, and how much of it is just because they don't?
Well, cash has a lot of sins. There's a lot of safety issues, which I really agree with. I mean, I've been in companies where the poor drivers are running around and with tens of thousands of dollars in their car, and that there's thieves out there, or bad actors out there trying to figure out where they are with this money so they could jack them. We've seen enough of that in the last week. Cash is very fungible. I've seen companies take cash across state lines that weren't supposed to. So people, in cash businesses, you do a lot of funny, bad things. And, it seems logical that the government would want to crack down on that. And that SAFE Act that everyone is talking about for the banking, I think that card's going to fall pretty soon from a safety standpoint and an accountability standpoint.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It also works with the history of the company too. I mean, if you're on a cash basis, you can't really show as much to establish yourself, especially if you're a small company. You can't get that funding. You can't get those lines of credits to grow. You can't, in this case, maybe your insurance won't cover and you can't fix your store or whatever, because you can't show that consistency. And until that changes, everyone's going to, for the most part, have some inconsistencies, it sounds like.
Agreed.
Dean, you had some views on some of the likes of MedMen, and they're, since you wrote the book, they've really fallen from grace even more so. And look at Canopy Growth. What do you attribute this to? Just mad spending and not realizing that if you're an MSO, all this expansion and buying companies with funny money, it just can only go so far? What do you think is going to be a correction point in this market? Being a CFO, I think you got a really good probably view on this.
So, well, look at how many CFOs that MedMen had that turned around and sued them. At least one, probably 2 or 3. They went through 3 CFOs as far as I know. But I think the MedMen situation, I've never met Adam Bierman or Andrew Modlin, never met them, but I don't know if I need to meet them. I don't want to meet them. Somehow they wrestled investment capital from overeager investors. Investors that should have known better, disciplined venture funds and managing directors of private equity funds. Somehow they got a little giddy, and these 2 30-year-old guys were the ones that were going to take them to the promised land. They made a nice store. They got on the profit. There are a lot of stories written about them, but that's a long, obviously if they're running low on cash, nobody did the math there. And so you probably have a CFO that's probably trying to get them a little discipline in basic financial matters, cash flow projections and all that stuff. And you've got people, these guys have never worked, from what I could tell, in a corporate environment before, and they don't know how the game is played. So they're out spending, thinking that they have an unlimited bucket of money. And then, from all accounts, from these lawsuits that I've read, there's been a lot of personal graft as well. So clearly these guys were not seasoned business owners. And another thing that's rampant in the industry is the lack of fiduciary responsibility. A lot of guys get a bucket of money. Maybe they're successful in their private businesses and they don't have to account to anybody except themselves, right? Now They have 200 shareholders, 200 employees, but they don't get it. They still run this big company with a lot of shareholders that you have a fiduciary responsibility to watch out for, and they still look at them like the enemy, and that's why shareholder lawsuits happen. That's why it's hard to get D&O insurance, or it's cost prohibitive, or it's not worth the paper that it's written on.
And therefore, you can't attract a good board, because without D&O insurance, no one's gonna want to sit on that board that's got credibility.
It's a death spiral. I mean, kind of look at High Times. They've got financial issues. They've got
they fired their CEO not long ago.
They've got strategy that's people are questioning.
Yeah, going into retail, you're talking about, correct?
Right. And they got Stormy Simon from Overstock, and she's out the door already. And it's kind of toxic, I think they're looking for a CFO, from what I understand. Who wants that job?
And the other question is, how many of these people are Peter principled at this stage? A lot. Would you say? Yeah. You've been around the industry. What do you think?
Oh, I write about it.
I know you did.
Yeah,
and I was in very much agreement. That's why I wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah, and again, it's not to say that the people that are in these positions haven't worked hard and they're not trying hard, but they just don't have the experience, the makeup, the integrity, the ethic, whatever, to run an operation that has to be transparent as a public company, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of people do Peter principle themselves out, and you're seeing it. I predicted in my book, even before the ink was dry, that for MedMen to make any forward progress, the kids have to go, And while my book was in editing and printing, the kids were shown the door, And there's going to be a lot more of that. There's been a lot of massive layoffs, a lot of big write-downs, a lot of bad results. And I think that I'm on a lot of these equity analyst calls, shareholder calls, and the industry is dying to be able to trust some projections and trust some numbers, but it's just not there yet. All these companies have not invested in the back office like you need to if you're serious about becoming a publicly held company.
Do you think it's because there's not really a lot of great back office software available for the industry at this stage that's specifically targeted to the industry, or not so much?
There's a lot of choices out there. I don't know how many of them are great. Part of these MSOs' problem is that they all probably started on QuickBooks. So, every company has its own QuickBook file, and you cannot consolidate. You cannot get ready for an audit easily. You can't close the books easily on a monthly basis and get the managers, the growers, the cultivators, the store operators, their KPIs and their budgets. A lot of people don't put any emphasis on budgets, and to some extent, you probably have to limit the time you do on budgets in a quickly growing company. But it's got to be something north of what's going on now, which is basically zero. So these equity analysts, they'll give them a couple quarters of taking a pass and nice job. Now the questions are very pointed on these calls. When are you going to be profitable? Everyone's looking at the bottom line now. I mean, in 2018 and early part of 2019, a year ago, Nobody was looking at the bottom line. It was top line growth. And that's, that's what you do in land grab strategies. But these guys just never have been in successful companies with land grab strategies before. I worked for another, beside Wing Heising, I worked for another, what I would call a truly world-class entrepreneur. His name is Brad Jacobs. Brad and I took a company public. It was a garbage company called United Waste Systems. And we hit a home run. And I tell a lot of stories about that company in there, and how, Brad had instant Wall Street credibility. His next venture, which was United Rentals, biggest equipment rental company in the world. You see their logos everywhere, throwing money at him because he did a great job with United Waste Systems. The company sold for $2 billion. Now Brad is amping it up again. He's the chairman for the last 5 or 6 years, maybe 8 or whatever, of XPO Logistics. And I'm sure you see their trucks all around here. It's now a $16 billion company. So those are my reference points. So when I look at lawyers running these MSOs or just companies, I don't get excited. I don't think that there's anything to really write home about yet in the cannabis industry.
Going on that topic, so, when we're looking at companies, when I did international investments and stuff like that, we kind of did a triage of pillars that we always looked for, regardless of the stage. There's always these fine things, whether it's the management team, how they set this up, are they still using QuickBooks, all that stuff. And I'm sure you do the same, whether it's someone you want to advise on the consulting side or maybe even invest to. And we have both of those out in our audience. So what are your pillars, whether it's 3 pillars, 4, what are your go-to that if they don't have these, you're not even interested in working with them, talking to them, let alone investing?
Well, I think loud and clear management.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that these
entrepreneurs,
entrepreneurial kids that got these licenses, good for them. Great. I mean, I never thought about applying for a license. I didn't. They dug in and they figured it out. Okay. But a kid with a license without experience in corporate America can only go so far. Mm-hmm. So management, and then secondly, what's your strategy? I mean, let's look at how Harvest is kind of Harvest Health and Recreation, how they've changed their strategy. It used to be everyone needs to be an MSO. That's where the money is. We're going to be vertically operated in many states, but there wasn't enough talent in these companies to do that. Okay, so Harvest is now kind of retrenching. They quit the deal they had with Verano. Both parties, I guess, ended that deal. And Harvest, and I think smart people are only doing as much as they could chew. I think they're realizing the hard way they can't be all things to all people. And while, yes, a land grab is an exciting, sexy story, unless you got the team to do it, you just embarrass yourself. So, management, and then what is your strategy?
And what do you think about, I know you guys, you and Dan both talk about these MSOs, and a lot of people are going the whole, whether it's CBD or cannabis now, the whole seed to sale route and keeping it maybe in their niche markets and doing different specific. I mean, I know they're not a niche market. I might go to is Cresco. I like everything that they do. I mean, they have great dispensary brands. They have a lot of knowledge. They have a great social equity program. I mean, they're really growing on me. There's my buzz, send me a check, whatever, but it's cool. But what's it about though? I mean, what makes them different and how they're doing something and hitting the pillars? Obviously they're big, but it seems like everyone still has their growing pains. Is it about identifying when you need help that people aren't taking advantage of, or is it just?
I think you nailed it. I think it's identifying, it's knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
So my top 3 that I think are doing a good job is True Leave, basically down in Florida. GTI, I think, is doing a good job, and Cresco, I think, is doing a good job as the MSOs. These guys are run by companies by managers that have been around the block a little bit before, and they know the value of spending money in unsexy ways. A lot of the, what I could say, immature companies, unless you're growing or selling, you're a cost to me and I don't need you. No, you can only go so far, and we're seeing the results of that. But, GTI, I know their accounting staff is 25 to 30 people or more, and it needs to be, in that way. They could do projections. now it's just a matter of fine tuning them, right, and making sure, learning. But a lot of companies, a lot of these MSO wannabes or smaller MSOs don't even have the infrastructure to do projections. I think they're learning. You're going to be more valuable. You're actually going to be more valuable if you do spend the money and have a buttoned up back office and have good, reliable financials and a great audit and good banking systems and cash flow projections, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I think the application process also makes it difficult for MSOs now, since there's such a variety of differences. I know our good friend Tom Howard, the cannabis lawyer, has a headache of dealing with multiple things, and he loves it because he wants to give people those approvals. But I know, just talking with him, every state, Michigan, I know some companies that have, multiple locations in Michigan, but have 17 applications here, and maybe we'll get one. Maybe,
Yeah. Agreed.
So, Dean, if you look around the country and around Canada, the United States, Europe, around the world, you're now seeing Uruguay and you're seeing Colombia come up. And what do you think of some of the things that are going on in those parts of the world? Have you kept up on that?
Not too much
from the industry, or
not too much. I know Israel's got a lot going on there, but I think what happens is these people that are running these companies, again, without corporate experience, they fool themselves. They think, oh, I could go to Greece, I could go to Colombia, I could go to Uruguay, and I'm gonna really dominate the world market. What are the chances of that? That's like a kid going to the NBA. There's a small chance of success unless you've been there, done that before. But they're they fool themselves. So I don't pay too much attention to what's going on the world market. I think my philosophy is 3 yards in a cloud of dust for now. I end the book by telling a story. I was with a company once, and the owner was reading about Six Sigma. General Electric's doing Six Sigma, and boy, Dean, don't you think we should do that? I said, no. Let's start with One Sigma, and grow from there. So 3 yards in a cloud of dust for now. No trick plays.
Yeah, I also think, and I'd like your opinion on this, that the margins are going to continue to be pushed down. It really is, like you said earlier. I believe you hit it right on the head when you said it's a land grab. But these MSOs, it's so expensive because the compliance issues in every state is different. Did you deal with that even at the early stage where you were, with all the different laws and the packaging laws, everything else?
Yeah, the companies I have been with, and I've been with a lot of companies. I write about a lot of stories in my book. I think I write over 30 stories, and I hide the names to protect the innocent. So I start out with like company A all the way through company Z. I ran out of letters. I had so many stories to tell, but compliance is a big issue. I mean, yeah, packaging. I've seen packaging people pull their head up, and there's lead time. If they're buying overseas, either Pakistan for a lot of the labels, or China obviously, or local. There's a lot of complex issues. So again, they're trying to figure out the supply chain as they're going along. Obviously, they just can't stop until it's perfect, but there's a lot of work that has to be done there, or there's a lot of opportunity to continue to squeeze down those costs.
I agree. So when we also look, have you had any exposure into the hemp side of the industry, the cannabis, for doing the CBD and the CBN, CBG? And curiously, I noticed that this year there's going to be fewer applications to grow because of there's a glut on the market from last year, which everybody was saying there wouldn't be enough. And now I was talking to people that thought they had $40 a kilo and it's down to 10. And I don't know what these farmers are thinking, but in different states, if you don't have experience doing this, there's so many idiosyncrasies to growing cannabis opposed to other crops like soybeans or corn or wheat. And did you have any experience with that on that side of the market as well?
Yeah, after I left this company that ended up selling for almost $1 billion, the phone was ringing off the hook. Recruiters like yourself, and I did get my hat thrown into the ring at Gen Cana, and you saw how that kind of turned out recently. Yeah. Hemp is I kind of stay away from it, although I do get a lot of phone calls and a deal flow across my desk with take a look at this, that, or the other thing. I invested early stage in a company called Natural Fiber Welding out of Peoria. And while it's not hemp specific, they do use hemp biomass, or they could use hemp biomass, banana leaves, a lot of stuff that you could get for free. And what they could do is make plant-based leather. And they've got the world beating a path down to Peoria right now. They've got major car companies taking a look at them because they're using these biomass products. And again, the problem with hemp is a commodity, and it's classic supply and demand. It was sexy 2 years ago. So all the farmers quit doing soybeans and corn and got into hemp, and just supply and demand just drove the price down. And you hear stories or rumors about farmers that, there is a glut, there's a lot in stores, there's a lot burned. You hear stories about suicides from farmers, because it wasn't the grass wasn't greener on the other side.
I know farmers last year that spent $700,000-800,000 for seeds, and I know a couple of them left the crop in the field because at the end, it was over the 3%. Yep. They had problems. They had issues, and they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't even have plans for drying. I mean, there's so many issues out there today that people are facing, and I think this year the reality struck. And then all these people that bought seeds, and a lot of people I know had male seeds come up last year, which destroyed their whole crop. And it's just, I talk to farmers all the time. I'm working with some folks that are developing the next generation futures trading program, and they're covering every point you could possibly cover. So I'm seeing a lot of idiosyncrasies I probably wouldn't have looked at before. And I'm just wondering if you encountered some of those, Dean.
Yeah, other than what I just got done talking about, it's I don't know. I think the cannabis industry is going to still get worse before it gets better. We are starting to see glimmers. I think everyone sees that, but then then 2 weeks of good news is shattered by some crappy earnings that come out, and layoffs and things like that. So I think there's still some right sizing that has to happen in cannabis. And I would only say on the hemp side of things, their supply demand is probably their issues are probably 2x what the cannabis issues are right now.
I think that, and just touching on that, I think companies like National Fiber Welding is what's needed, because I remember, it was the whole season. Everyone's crop was too hot, and there's actually no options for it. There's thousands of different things. Plastic, you can make hempcrete that's fireproof or fire resistant. I've seen thousands of degrees on the scientific testing, but there's not enough companies that do that. And now we have this product because everyone thinks it's the gold buzz, the CBD phase, and people are going to buy it up. But if they get over that 0.3%, then what do they do? And I think that really causes a huge issue. And that's why we need more companies. Like, we need companies or incubators to not be on the cultivating side and the dispensary side of cannabis and hemp, but on the industrial side, the material side, because that's only going to provide funding and support to build out the industry, right? Because we're talking about something that's a lot different than anything out there. We're talking about something that's treated both as a drug and a food and a material. There's nothing else out there like that. But unfortunately, right now, the options are really a food and a drug, right? There isn't that much support. And do you see that changing soon? Are you seeing companies that come across your table that are in those categories, the plastics, the hempcrete, the different type of fibers like what they're using in the leather?
Only this one company, just because I invested in it early, and I'm a big fan. I think it's got a great management team, several patents, like dozens of patents. The management team have been around the block. They know what they're talking about. They know their chemistry, and the proof is that the big and the problem it solves too. If you're making traditional textiles or whatnot, you use a hell of a lot of oil, and now all these denim companies, they want to look good for their customers. They want to be able to say that my leather or whatever is good for the environment, and so it's a real selling point. And they're just to the point now where they're commercializing their product. But again, they could use all of this free, cheap biomass and have a better product than pure leather. Here's an example. leather, if you want leather for a car, cars use a lot of leather. But if you want to put like 5 yards of leather in a car, you need 15 yards of stock to work with because of all the imperfections of the leather. Well, when you're making plant-based leather, there are no imperfections. So, but anyway, enough about them.
So, with the medical side, did you touch on the medical side when you were with any of the companies, or have you done any consulting in that area with medical research in the cannabis side of the industry to do efficacy and trials in different areas of medicine?
No, but I do write extensively in the book about. I'm just amazed how CBD companies. I mean, Dean, try this product, and I call the chapter snake oil, and they say try this product, and I try it, nothing happens, and just recently, just the other day, I tried it for another product for 21 days, didn't work, I sent it back. So I don't know, maybe my body's not wired that way. I'm sure that CBD products work for certain people, but without testing, you can't make claims. And so it's kind of a witch's brew, maybe, and then maybe you think it works. I don't know, but I'll tell you right now, the stuff I tried doesn't work for me. And I write humorously about that in my book.
I know you did. I think what we're waiting for is, the government to take cannabis from the class 1 drugs status and move it to where there can be research. We're falling behind in world research for medical. The Israelis lead, the Germans are big in it. I would say those two in the UK and even Spain and France are doing a lot in research. China too. And
well, I agree. I don't disagree with you. We need to do research, even on the cannabis side of things.
Well, I think that's what's going to change the industry. I mean, right now, for instance, just in the banking industry, there's a lot of issues because of chargebacks. CBD, for instance, nationwide legal, but find bank that will provide for that, right? They won't, because there's always still people out there saying this is the best product, but they won't refund your money, right? They won't do that. So until that happens, so it's very interesting. Right now, there are some movements I'm seeing saying that all your products have to have that COA. They have to have that lab testing. They have to have that scannable QR code so that your clients, patients, people ordering online can see exactly what it is, because there has to be that regularity, not just to save face for the industry saying that this product works, because you more than likely are going to be very reluctant to try a good product because you're striking twice already, right? So that kind of hurts the industry as a whole. But it also helps on a medical standpoint. The FDA is very tricky, and it's not necessarily a drug or a food. So is it, where does it fall? So I think that's a good step in the right direction. I know that if the banks that we work with, for instance, or any companies that want to list it on their exchanges, you have to have that, right? I mean, Dan, from working with your counterparts that if they don't have that COA or any type of lab testing, you're not even going to touch it. Correct?
And I've run into a lot of labs that basically say the owners want them to basically fabricate actual testing, and they won't do it. But that's gone on a lot, especially in Nevada.
Well, there's a lot of funny business going on with labs, and I've seen it firsthand. I've seen fraud firsthand. When it comes to lab testing and getting around the state rules. I mean, I was working with a company in one state where they were trying to put forth a THC product that they could make in another state, and they were doing all the testing in the state that didn't allow THC. They had no right to have this cannabis in the first place, and now they're telling the lab, and labs are going along with it or not going along with it. Is a lot of funny business going out there, and then the consistencies of one lab to another.
Right.
Are the labs that variable, or are the crops that variable? There's a lot of work to be done.
There's a lot of that too. I think you hit a point there, Dean. And I mean, that's the other thing. If we do get to where we're using this as medicine, how do the replication really has to be with cloning, and it has to be with genetic scientists that are doing these modifications that can be replicated, which means you need a growing model and growing system with the exact same thing every time. And I think GW Systems got in trouble with that, or GW Pharma with Epidiolex even, and the FDA took a second look at them a couple times with some of the testing and the consistency.
Yeah, you talk about growing conditions. That reminds me, I went to University of Illinois down in Champaign, and they have something called the Underground Library. And right next to the Underground Library is this half-acre, they call it the Morrow Plots. And they've grown corn or whatever they grow there year after year after year after year. Same place, and they measure the results, and they track the sunlight and all that stuff. And the reason that they put the library underground is so as to not disturb the Morrow plots. You know, so that's, to me, that's the ultimate in being consistent. You know, they didn't want shade from the library to hit the Morrow plots because that could throw off decades of research.
Right.
But, yeah,
it's all about the lighting and the types of lighting and the fertilizers and everything being replicated each time.
Yep.
At 100%. So it's not an easy business to begin with. It's a new business. We're going to see, as you said, I believe it's not any different than any of the tech companies I dealt with in new segments that evolved in the Silicon Valley. You get 4 to 7 to 8 companies out there that are vying for it. 3 or 4 screw up at the beginning. 1 or 2 take the lead. And we're going to see the same thing in the cannabis industry, only I think it's going to be greater failure rates, longer time to get the market stabilized. And then I think we'll see then big pharma, big tobacco, beverage companies, distribution, everything, and the edible side of the food industry come into this in a big way. But,
yeah, I agree.
But we're not quite there yet.
I think some of the problems we're running into this industry, like you mentioned earlier in the show, we've seen them before, internet or Bitcoin or whatever. I was looking for somebody to write the forward for my book, and I know this investment banker in Chicago, Bill Snow.
I was about to say I didn't get the text.
Bill wrote the book Mergers and Acquisitions for Dummies, and I'm thinking, wow, that's somewhat appropriate. You know, a lot of people are doing mergers and acquisitions with other people's money and not really knowing what the hell they're doing. You know, so he wrote the foreword of the book, and you know, he ends he was spot on. He says, you know, this is just the latest incarnation, you know, of a caravan going through town with the latest get-rich-quick scheme. He says, we've seen this story before, and we'll see it again, but will we learn? And I think that's what we as an industry need to do. You know, I think we're looking at a lot more bottom line, a lot more projections, a lot more private equity firms that are demanding this. You know, it's moving to a meet my expectations. It's moving from best efforts to meeting expectations. And these guys are on short leashes now. And if you're not going to meet the expectations, if you can't project and meet those expectations and keep you know, the exchanges satisfied and the equity analysts satisfied, I think your days are numbered.
It kind of reminds me back in the day when I was in the boiler rooms and I worked with a couple of investment banks on Madison Street, you know, 300 dials, standing next to someone.
Was that you? That was you.
That was me. That was me. I called you probably 30 times, but I got you on the 29th. But either way, the things that they said out there always made sense. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people addicted to hopium, hoping that whatever chances they take are going to land it. And they're heavily addicted to it. They won't learn from it. They just keep replicating the same mistakes. And unfortunately, sometimes it works out for them, but you know, they're addicted on hoping that something happens.
Well, there's a lot of emotion in this business. You know, everybody, you read people on LinkedIn or you listen to interviews, and everyone's passionate about this industry. I'm not that person. You know, I'm interested in the industry. I hope it does well, but you, Dan, or you, Alton, you could invest your money wherever you want it to go. There's nothing to say you need to invest your money in the cannabis industry. I mean, I've even heard my definition of passion is some very well-known person in the industry said, when it comes to voting for the president, I've got one red line. What is this guy's position on cannabis? I mean, that's passion. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on in the country, and I'm not going to fault him for how he believes. I don't believe that way, you know. So there's a lot of passionate people. I like the industry. I don't get emotional, and maybe that's good. You know, maybe that's good that you need, you know, some kind of third party people that have been around the block before, kind of looking down and saying this doesn't make sense.
Well, we got some questions coming up here, but before we get to that, I mean, you've said a lot of things, and you just said you're not like me passionate about this industry, and that's fine. But I want to touch on that. You've did some awesome things in your past. You've been a part of awesome companies. You've seen the good, the bad. You travel around with your plane with your wife. What is cool to Dean right now? I mean, I grew up where you live in Naperville. What is cool? It doesn't have to be cannabis. What are you working on? At least, that you want to share. Everything else you can text me and share after the show. But whatever you want to share with them, what is it? You got to be working on something cool.
Well, I'm working on, I do get a lot of deal flow across my desk and working with companies who are either trying to raise money or they want to hire me on a employee or consulting basis. So I do some of that type of work. I was just out on the East Coast. What I like to do is fly around and golf. My wife and I were out to to the Greenbrier last week in West Virginia, did some golf. I got a call from a company up in Maryland, and talk to them. What excites me is that finding like-minded people. I mean, I got more yesterdays than tomorrows, unlike you, Alton. You're a young guy, so my time is precious.
I got a couple great ones.
My time is precious, so I don't need to get into the industry, but if I do, I want to work with like-minded people who have integrity, who have a business plan, who have some big prospects. And it doesn't even have to be a big company. It's just got to be, a lot of fun. I don't want to work 80 hours a week anymore. I don't even want to work 40 hours a week anymore, if at all. So what I'm working on, one tangible thing is before I got in cannabis, I was working on a 50-50-50 event. And by that, I mean, do something in 50 states in 50 days. Do 50 things in 50 states in 50 days. So I was working on getting sponsors lined up for doing 50 rounds of golf in 50 states in 50 days. And then the phone rang for the cannabis. So that's on hold. So that is a passion of mine. That is something I would love to do, and it's all sorts of permutations. I could have 50, I could do marketing for Starbucks. I could have 50 cups of Starbucks in 50 states in 50 days. Of course, I'd fly around myself, and that would be something fun for me to do. But since those days, I've had hip surgery while I'm golfing. I don't know if I could do 50 in 50 in 50 anymore, but that's definitely a passion. My wife's taken up golf in the last 5 years, and now she's at the point where she's beating me. So,
I like it. It's
I
got
hope
to be.
hip surgery was easy for you. I know there's a couple good companies out there that have some very, same day release surgeries in the UK and stuff. So I'm sure you had some good stuff. You're still out there golfing.
Yeah.
So Alton, you want to start with some of the questions that our audience has for Dean tonight?
Actually, earlier we were talking about, really making sure that they knew their budgets. When we were talking about the companies doing wrong, doing right, doing the right things. One of the questions that people had, were you talking about more about their sales forecasting budgets or more of the operating expenses, really keeping an eye on those?
Yeah, all the above. When we were trying to sell this company, the first thing, things like due diligence are not on owners' radar screens if they've never been with a big company before. They don't know that they've got to be buttoned up because people are going to be asking a lot of questions if you're going to sell the company. First question, predictably, was, let's see your forecast. And, I didn't beat around the bush. I told them, I don't have any forecasts for you. What's the next question? And this is unheard of. Yeah. If you're a public company and you want to buy a company for almost $1 billion and they don't even have any forecasts, or the forecasts are done on the back of a napkin, and it's got one column for revenue and one column for EBITDA, and there's no science behind it, So that's your sales forecast, and of course it's a game because the selling company wants those revenues to be as high as possible that you could get away with, right? Before you can't pass the red face test anymore, because that's what the multiple was based off of, revenue. But probably a more important forecast is your cash flow and OpEx. And I'm on these analyst calls now. We're starting to hear questions about that. We're starting to hear companies be responsive to that and kind of beating the analyst to the bush. They're talking about discretionary CapEx that they could avoid if if the poop hits the fan, you know, and cash is tight. So yes, all the above, you know, and to do that, you can't have 3 bookkeepers that are tasked to do that. You need a professional team. You know, you need something north of 0 talent in there to be able to pull this off. You need financial planning and analysis. You need a controller that could consolidate these financials. And these are all learnings to, you know, some of the companies I've worked with in the past.
Absolutely, and that's a good point, especially on the accounting side, because it's not your typical accounting, for instance, that I do for myself because I'm just, you know, I have my own LLC or sole proprietor or whatever you have. You have to have someone not only doing your books, but checking for the fraud. There's about 3 or 4 different categories. I know that one of our groups that we work with, Kane Ethics, out of California, they do nationwide accounting and financial work, even helping people through this with their PPP applications. And I don't, obviously you know that, but what are those other areas besides just the typical accounting that you need, especially for taxes, that they should look into?
Well, tax is a big issue. I mean, you've got a lot of investors, and I write about this in my book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of these companies are set up as LLCs. As an LLC, you pass K-1s to the investors because they're responsible at the end of the day for the tax burden. And predictably, around, you know, February or March, these investors' accountants call you up and say, hey, where's my K-1? And again, this is all new to owners that have never had shareholders before.
Right.
Know? And the closer you get to April 15th, the louder, you know, the more the phones ring. One company I was with, I tried to head this off in January. And I said, I wanted to send an email out to all of our investors. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the time frame. Here's what you could expect. And I had to explain this to the owners, why this is needed. And the owners said, whoa, you'll send an email out? Hold on there. Because I'm going to now turn this into an investment newsletter. And I'm going to tell the investors all the good things we're doing and what we're doing. And we had a good year, and next year's going to be better, rah, rah, rah. I said, don't let it screw up the schedule. Well, sure enough, you know, I didn't get that thing out by the end of January. It didn't go out by the end of February. It didn't go out in March, you know, because the owners were out spending other people's money doing stupid acquisitions at stupid prices, you know. And so that kind of back office buttoning. HR is another area where lawsuits are happening. You know, you can't run 200 person with 200 employee company with half an HR person, you know, but they try.
Bingo.
They try.
Oh my God. You're speaking my language, because I've been calling some of these folks, and I'm blown away after dealing with professional HR for so many years. And it's underwhelming, the people that are running these HR departments.
And don't get me wrong, you don't have to have a finance and an accounting department and an HR department and a legal department like you would if you're a commercial bank. Okay, you still need to be nimble and entrepreneurial, but you need something more than what I've seen in some of these companies.
Very true.
I write in my book too. I write in the preface of my book, guys. Dan, you got an opinion? Hey, that's my book. Dan, you got an opinion? Alton, you got an opinion? I got an opinion. Just because I wrote it in my book doesn't mean that, you know, everyone's got to believe. I don't care if everyone believes it or not. But what I do tell people is this is my perspective. I've seen these things firsthand. All the stories are true. I'm not making up anything. And go find other data points. You know, don't say, hey, just because Dean said the industry is a mess, the industry is a mess. I'm just one person, right? Go find other people's data points. Read their books. Call up their CEOs. Talk to equity analysts. But, you know, right now, I think I'm summarizing the state of the industry. As I said earlier, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it will be good. I mean, it's a good mid to long-term play. I mean, how many industries do you know where revenue is going up 150% a year? You know, and you know, with that hides a lot of sins, but it also gives you a little bit of time to correct these things. So, I mean, people just have to focus on cost control and rationalizing the number of employees and the costs and understanding, you know, their business more. They got to run a business.
Absolutely. And, you know, now it's been about an hour, so it wraps up our time here. I know we are very appreciative of having you on, Dean. Thanks for the fire as well. I'll look for that slice of pizza. And, you know, it's been a great chat. You know, we covered a lot of different things here. I hope our audience had a good, took some notes on, had a good time watching and listening. Tony's going to provide all the contact where you can find Dean, reach out to him if you need any of that consulting. This will also be replayed as a recording throughout the Green and Shy channels, throughout all the social media. You know, we really appreciate the following. Hopefully this is something that, you know, really helps you find those connections, those opportunities that you need, because they are out there. You just can't sit on your ass and hopefully live on that hopium and hopefully they find you, right? You have to go out there and get it. And it might be difficult right now, but you can research, you can find out that it's always about finding a solution. So, you know, I'll let Dan say his goodbyes as well. I hope you guys all stay safe out there and love each other.
And Dean, thank you for being with us tonight. It was a great interview. We enjoyed having you. And also, would you like to tell people how they can get in touch with you the best way if they're interested in learning more about what you do as a consultant?
Yeah, the best way is go to my LinkedIn. I got a bunch of contact information there. Another way, I've got some additional links. I've got a book website. The website is gonetopotbook.com, and on there there's a bunch of additional links about my aviation and a little history about myself. My wife and I run a golf products company as well. So we're just trying to have some fun.
Well, it was fun having you tonight, Dean. Thank you. I look forward to getting together with you sometime soon, and we can continue this over a glass of wine or a beer. Other than that, Alton, thank you as always for being my sidekick tonight. Dean, thanks for joining us. I hope that pizza turns out to perfection, as I'm sure it will. And until next time, everyone out there, be well. And like Alton said, love each other, and have a great week. Until next week, be well. Bye.
Ciao for now.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.